其实这个法案里面，就是你觉得中共敢不敢跨境抓人？比如说到台湾把美国人抓回去，因为违反这个法案，你觉得敢不敢啊？因为如果这样的话，他可以抓很多几十万、几百万人，他都可以抓，他敢不敢？你觉得
？Yeah, so this is the problem with the law, is that they can pick and choose who they want to prosecute. Right now, the Chinese government has a list of what they call Taiwan independence diehards. In other words, people who are pro-Taiwan independent. So this is the beginning of their law. In other words, they're practicing identifying people and using the law to attack those people and to also send a message to other people who might have similar ideas. Again, this is an example of transnational repression from the Chinese Communist Party. So 2 years ago, in May of 2024, the Supreme People's Court, the Supreme People's Protectorate, and the Ministry of Public Security announced a new update to the criminal code. It was a update for Article 103 of the criminal code. And so this article has to do with splitting the state, separating it out. In other words, making other separate countries or separate identities. That's what this law is about in the criminal code. So the ethnic law that we just talked about was approved and will be implemented the 1st of July. It applies to all ethnic groups. This law that I'm talking about is specifically focused on Taiwan. So anyone who promotes Taiwan, even peacefully, politically, any way it is now, is subject to prosecution according to this law. For example, if a person or an institution, a think tank, promotes the idea that Taiwan should be a member of an international organization, and that international organization requires the members to be states, countries, this law applies to those people and those institutions as being illegal. So anyone also on the internet or in articles and books and speeches that make the argument that Taiwan should exist as it is today is illegal according to their criminal code. So what is the punishment according to the criminal code? Okay, so let me just get to the spot where it talks about it. Okay, so there's kind of two levels according to the criminal code. There are the people who are the ringleaders, the leaders, who are promoting it in a very strong way. They organize demonstrations, or they have organizations that promote the Taiwan independence. That's one category. And the other category are just people who might promote it but are not leaders. So the ringleaders, the main leaders, can be sentenced to either life sentence or up to 10 years in jail because they are considered major criminal acts against the law. And of those people who are leaders, if they do things that harm China or are especially serious, they could be given the death sentence according to the law. So the other people, the people who are not leaders, can be given, depending on the level of what they did, they can be given a prison sentence of 3 years up to 10 years, etc. and in some cases, even just detained for a shorter period of time. And if anyone is prosecuted and found to be working with foreign governments or foreign organizations or foreigners, that is also a severe criminal sentence. For example, if the foreign support was asking for funding or to give them weapons or to promote Taiwan's independence by a foreign entity, and the Taiwanese person is connected to the foreign entity, the Taiwanese person would be given a much more severe penalty according to the law. A recent example is if you remember, members of parliament from New Zealand came to visit Taiwan, and later the same group of people from the parliament from New Zealand wanted to visit China, and China said that those people who came to visit Taiwan would not be allowed to go to China. So this is the beginning of what we're going to see in the future. China will be implementing parts of this law to see how far they can go in terms of enforcing it outside of China. I see that this will become more and more common and also more severe as China tries to force its one China principle upon the entire world. The important thing about this criminal law, this Article 103, is that in the Criminal Code of China, they also say that they can conduct a trial of anyone even though they're not in China. It's called trial in absentia. So for example, Chinese courts can conduct a trial against Taiwanese supporters in China's courts in China, even if the person has never been to China or Hong Kong or Macau. So that's the problem. So we don't know, for example, who has been prosecuted by the law, because there might be a lot of people that have pending arrest warrants that we don't know about. Also, this law, they updated Article 80, which says that there is no expiration for prosecution. In other words, it doesn't matter when you were pro-Taiwan, they can still prosecute you. And they modified Article 107 regarding funding these efforts. For example, Taiwanese businesses, business owners, donors, or ordinary citizens who support pro-independence political parties like the DPP, or candidates or advocacy groups can be charged under Article 107 for funding activities that endanger national security. So the question is, who has been prosecuted so far? Well, there was a Taiwanese man, Yang Chi-yuan, who was visiting China in August of 2024, 2 months after the law, and was arrested. And he was arrested and charged under Article 103, for promoting Taiwan separatism. And he was sentenced to 9 years in prison and additional 3 years deprivation of political rights. And what that means is he's in prison for 9 years, but he probably can't leave China for another 3 years after he gets out of prison. Another person that was prosecuted was Li Yanhe. He's a Taiwan-based publisher and founder of Gusa Press. And his books that they published were about political sensitive topics like Tiananmen Square, Hong Kong, etc. And he was visiting China in March of 2023, a year before this law, the criminal code, was updated. They kept him in detention until this law became active. He was sentenced in early 2025, and his trial was in June of 2024, just after the law was updated. So this explains the idea in the law that it doesn't matter when you did your action, they will prosecute you, even if it was before the law was passed. He was found guilty of promoting Taiwan independence, and he was sentenced to 3 years in prison. Then the other two people that are not political is Puma Shen and Robert Tsao. They were prosecuted in October of 2024. Well, actually, Puma Shen is a legislator in the DPP, and Robert Tsao is a billionaire, retired semiconductor president. Both of them promote Taiwanese civil defense and resilience training. It's believed that these two were tried in absentia. In other words, their trial occurred without them being there in China. And they are considered ringleaders, and so they would get the most severe penalty that the law allows. So the Taiwan Affairs Office of China maintains a blacklist roster of people that they consider to be promoters of Taiwan independence. So officially they have 14 names, but we know that there are probably a lot more. So you can imagine there was the Communist Party named 3 people in 2021 that are diehard separatists, meaning that they are ringleaders. One of them is the former premier of Taiwan, Su Cheng-chong, the Secretary General of the National Security Council, and you can imagine the list is most of the leadership of Taiwan, including the Vice President, the Defense Minister, the Deputy Secretary General of the National Security Council, a lot of people. This year, they announced 2 more people added to the list, the Minister of Interior and the Minister of Education of Taiwan. I guess the most, the part that is also disturbing of this law is that they have what they call a tip box. So what the Chinese Ministry of Public Security did was they launched a dedicated tip email address to encourage people to report anyone they thought promoted Taiwan independence. So this allows internet users to submit clues and evidence regarding any Taiwanese citizen or organization involved in supporting or financing Taiwan's independence. So what I talked about so far was 2 laws. One was the ethnic law, which we spent some time explaining what it was about, of making China more unified and getting rid of any kind of people who are thinking differently or acting differently. And this modification was specifically focused on Taiwan. So anybody who promotes the idea that they're not Han Chinese or they're different than the Han Communist Chinese is going to get in trouble in China, and if they support people who believe that from outside, China will be watching them and trying to catch them, or at least put pressure on them to stop doing it. So getting back to Luda's question about there must be tens or hundreds of thousands of people that are doing things that are against the PRC law, that these people are constantly being monitored and evaluated for prosecution according to the law. We also know that China has paid companies to develop algorithms or software that will collect information on people that promote Taiwan or other ethnic people in China, and they're being tracked. And whenever they want to prosecute them, they have the evidence that they've collected. Another example of this is when the president of Taiwan, Lai Ching-te, wanted to fly to a country called Eswatini in Africa, and the countries around that country, Eswatini, did not allow him to fly through their airspace. He wanted to go there because the king was having a celebration, an anniversary of his rule, and invited the president of Taiwan to participate in the event. The president of Taiwan, President Lai, was able to go because the king sent his own plane to pick him up and fly him to Eswatini. This is an example of China trying to use its power to prevent the president of Taiwan from visiting Africa. What happened about a year ago was most of the African countries agreed to support China with its One China principle and help China, this is the important part, and help China to unify Taiwan with it. So we can see how China is trying to slowly make people, companies, countries follow its rules. And this is very dangerous because this means that China is basically making the rules of the world, and the international community needs to stop them from doing that. Because what China represents is not democracy, but a totalitarian, Leninist, Marxist, oppressive society.